It may be the start of the year, but of course it is the end of the season for my favorite professional sport, American football, aka hand egg, which, I know sentence 2 is a little bit early for a random aside, even for me, but here I wanted to put in a clip of a comedian describing hand egg, which I was sure originated in an Eddie/Susie Izzard bit, but apparently I was wrong. Apparently the origins of this comes from this letter to the editor to the New York Times from 1909, which honestly, it makes it even more delightful. Anyway, the end of the hand egg season means the big game, the superb owl, and that means commercials. Because that's America, baby. If we care about one thing, it's men giving each other concussions while slapping each other on the butt. And if we care about two things, it's that and also capitalism, which is why not only do we get excited for companies to spend like $10 million to get us to buy their products, but we get so excited that now we're getting shown teasers for the commercials several weeks before they air. Truly, it is a wonderful time to be alive. At this time last year, the big ad buy that caught my attention was the He Gets Us ads for Jesus, which I covered in full in this video, which you can go watch now if you would like. If you don't feel like pausing this to go watch it, here's the summary. That ad campaign was sponsored by a shadowy group of billionaires pushing evangelical Christianity, including the Hobby Lobby guy who goes to court to try to stop his employees from using their own money to buy birth control. I have a feeling we're going to see more of those He Gets Us ads this year, but I also noted a new player popping up during this year's divisional championship games, a really heartbreaking spot that, quote, includes the lived experiences of child sexual abuse. So content warning, I'm going to be talking about that.
I was 3 months old when it started.
I was 6 years old.
They said, don't tell anyone.
I needed help.
They took pictures and videos.
The images of me have been found over 36,000 times.
They're on iCloud now.
I just want them gone. I think about the pictures and the videos a lot.
The abusers who watch them.
Save them.
Or share them on iCloud.
Apple could help us.
But they don't.
I rarely pay attention to commercials, but this one caught my eye for obvious reasons. It's pretty dramatic, and it's calling out Apple, which is a huge corporation who I have a few connections with. Like, I've been using Apple products for 20 years now, and I have no desire to switch my phone or my laptop anytime soon. I should also mention that I am married to an engineer who works for Tim Apple, so I have a vested interest in whether or not they're evil. I already knew that Apple has its major flaws. I hate the walled garden aspect, the culty aspect, the possible abuse of workers who make the devices aspect, all that stuff. But I've always appreciated Apple's seeming commitment to privacy. Particularly, when it comes to things like end-to-end encryption. I have a few privacy-pilled friends who don't use Apple products because they have the knowledge and energy to set up systems that protect them. I do not have that knowledge or that energy, so I'm more or less happy to just take the Apple shortcut. After seeing that very anti-Apple ad, I went out searching for more information to determine how and why exactly the company is aiding in the spread of child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. And boy, did I find a weird little can of worms. I mean, you probably assumed that, because if I looked into it and just found a normal, sensible thing, you probably wouldn't be watching me talk about this on YouTube right now. So I got my first hint when I went to the URL they promoted, protectchildrennotabuse.com, where I clicked on About Us, and I learned that the ad buyer was the HEAT Initiative, an organization founded and run by Sarah Gardner, who previously was the vice president of external affairs for Thorn. Thorn, remember Thorn? No? Well, allow me to put another link to a previous video I made in which I discussed the fact that Thorn is an outrageously problematic organization that agitates for police to harass consenting adult sex workers while failing miserably in its mission to stop child sex trafficking. Also, it was founded by Ashton Kutcher, who asked a judge to go easy on his friend, the convicted rapist. Thorne develops technology that rightfully concerns privacy advocates like Meg Foster of Georgetown Law's Center on Privacy and Technology, who told Forbes concerning Thorne's facial recognition software, technology initially intended to serve a narrow purpose like combating human trafficking can easily and quickly expand into a tool for mass surveillance, especially when there is no oversight of these private and philanthropic partnerships between technology creators and law enforcement agencies. I'm sure none of that is relevant to what Gardner, along with two other former Thorne executives, are now doing with the Heat Initiative, right? Oh, wait. Yes, it is. Back in 2021, Apple announced that they would now scan for any child sexual abuse images that users uploaded to their iCloud accounts, even if those accounts were kept private. And upon detection, they would report that user to law enforcement. This move was applauded by Thorne and other organizations, but intensely criticized by privacy advocates who couldn't quite believe Apple's initial claim that they could do this without violating the privacy of users who were not pedophiles, and that it could do it without nudging that boulder over the edge of a slippery slope, at the bottom of which, of course, was a salivating horde of authoritarian despots. Personally, I understand their skepticism. I don't know much about the inner workings of cryptography, but I do know that when I ask my iPhone to show me photos I've taken of dogs, the first 40 images include 6 cats, 2 cats dressed as a bear, 2 cats dressed as Totoro, 1 cat dressed as a bunny, 1 cat dressed as a shark. Look, Brendan loved dressing up, I swear. 1 wallaby and 1 stuffed toy squirrel. To be fair, they are all mammals and most of them are real, but they're certainly not all dogs. And that's no big deal, but what if it was against the law to have pictures of dogs on your phone? And here I am, an innocent person with this treasured memory from the first time I met a wallaby, getting a knock on the door from the feds to ask me a few questions and confiscate all of my devices for an unspecified period of time. That wouldn't be good. When it announced this feature, Apple had a complicated explanation for how it would detect the CSAM without sacrificing end-to-end encryption. But security experts were quick to point out how this policy could lead to false reports from photos on phones that even hadn't been uploaded to iCloud. And it could also easily be adapted by authoritarian governments to root out activists and political opponents. It seems that then those experts dug further into the issue, and apparently they found such serious problems that shortly after the announcement, Apple backtracked and said, actually, they would not be doing that after all. They instead beefed up measures that would allow parents to opt into features that would stop children from sharing potentially inappropriate images, stopping at least one form of exploitation, predators grooming children into sharing nudes, before it starts. It's also worth noting that because email does not have end-to-end encryption, Apple already scans attachments in iCloud Mail for possible CSAM and proactively reports and bans users for it. This brings us to last year when the Heat Initiative showed up demanding that Apple move forward with their original plan. Apple actually responded publicly to Heat Initiative with a letter stating in part that scanning every user's privately stored iCloud data would create new threat vectors for data thieves to find and exploit. It would also inject the potential for a slippery slope of unintended consequences. Scanning for one type of content, for instance, opens the door for bulk surveillance and could create a desire to search other encrypted messaging systems across content types. They went on to say, scanning systems are also not foolproof, and there is documented evidence from other platforms that innocent parties have been swept into dystopian dragnets that have made them victims when they have done nothing more than share perfectly normal and appropriate pictures of their babies. Apparently, this did not convince the Heat Initiative because, well, I just saw that commercial during a nationally televised football game. They don't mention any of those privacy concerns in their commercial, but they have thrown in a quote from a former Apple executive saying, "We are the greatest platform for distributing child porn," which is quite upsetting. So I looked into it. It actually comes from texts revealed in discovery for a lawsuit in which Apple's anti-fraud chief Eric Friedman explains that sites like Facebook don't care about privacy, and so they have an easier time than Apple does finding and banning users doing illegal things. Considering that, plus the fact that all iPhone users are automatically opted into iCloud photo storage, it stands to reason that the platform would have more illegal content on it than other networks. Those texts from 2020 might be exactly why Apple started exploring ways to detect CSAM while still holding on to their reputation as protectors of privacy. They thought there might be a problem and they might be able to help fix it. In the end, I personally think Apple made the right decision. As Edward Snowden remarked, it would be a terrible idea even if there were no serious security flaws. Once the precedent has been set that it is fit and proper for even a pro-privacy company like Apple to make products that betray their users and owners, Apple itself will lose all control over how that precedent is applied. As soon as the public first came to learn of the spy phone plan, experts began investigating its technical weaknesses and the many ways it could be abused, primarily within the parameters of Apple's design. Although these valiant vulnerability research efforts have produced compelling evidence that the system is seriously flawed, they also seriously miss the point. Apple gets to decide whether or not their phones will monitor their owners' infractions for the government, but it's the government that gets to decide what constitutes an infraction and how to handle it. When you consider that, and you add in those actual security flaws, it's a no-brainer. Turning 1 billion phones into narcs is not the way to end child exploitation. Now, in my previous Super Bowl commercial video expose, I mentioned that the He Gets Us ads are funded by a shadowy cabal of billionaires. So I would be remiss if I failed to mention that the He Initiative's Protect Children Not Abuse campaign is also funded by a shadowy cabal of billionaires who wish to remain anonymous despite literally calling for the end of privacy for 1 billion Apple users. The only difference is that this shadowy cabal is ostensibly liberal. The Intercept has a great deep dive on Hopewell Fund, the labyrinthine billionaire-backed network listed as the owner and operator of ProtectChildrenNotAbuse.com, which has been deemed the left's equivalent of the Koch brothers. While they've earned that by advocating for causes like universal basic income, they also occasionally throw conservatives a bone, like in 2017 when the NFL asked them to administer a fund in the hopes of convincing players to stop protesting the national anthem. A He Initiative spokesperson told The Intercept that Hopewell serves as the organization's fiscal sponsor, an arrangement that allows tax-deductible donations to pass through a registered nonprofit on its way to an organization without tax-exempt status. Liao declined to provide a list of the He Initiative's funders beyond the two mentioned by the New York Times, referring to this article from last fall that mentions the Children's Investment Fund Foundation and the Oak Foundation, each of which was founded by British billionaires, and the latter of which recently gave $250,000 to weaken end-to-end encryption in the EU. That New York Times article also mentions that Apple isn't just being targeted by this one group. A group of 24 investors with nearly $1 trillion in assets under management have also called on Apple to publicly report the number of abusive images that it catches across its devices and services. 2 investors, Degroof Petercam, a Belgian asset manager, and Christian Brothers Investment Services, a Catholic investment firm, will submit a shareholder proposal this month that would require Apple to provide a detailed report on how effective its safety tools were at protecting children. And of course, Apple continues to be pressured to weaken end-to-end encryption by various governments, both my own here in the United States and those abroad, in the hope that they can, do a little more spying on us for the children and or terrorism, whatever's hot right now. So that's the straight dope on that scary ad that you're probably going to see more of this year, nestled between Doritos and Bud Light commercials. Don't buy into the hype. If Apple is evil, it's not because they are refusing to trade away their users' privacy in order to catch nefarious criminals. If anything, they're evil because a few weeks ago, they told 121 people working in their San Diego office that they were going to have to move to Austin, Texas, or be out of a job, something that should, frankly, be illegal. It should be twice as illegal if the person in question has a uterus. It's a crime against humanity to force someone to move from California to Texas in the year of our Lord 2024. Maybe make a commercial about that, and I'll sign your petition. But yeah, not this thing about child abuse.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.